The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the sound of dry wind moving across the barren ground. In the middle of the wasteland, there was a shallow pit, dug into the earth like a forgotten grave. Inside the pit, an alien woman lay curled on her side, her thin arms covering her face, her body trembling with every breath. Her skin carried scars long and deep, as if life itself had carved reminders of her pain. Her voice, weak and cracked, whispered again and again, "Bury me here, please. I am not breeding material." She had been cast aside by her own people, thrown away like broken pottery. They had marked her as useless, saying she could never bring life into the world. In their eyes, she was a failure, a waste, a thing to be forgotten. And so they left her in the dirt, a place where silence and dust would finish what cruelty had begun. Her throat was dry, her lips split with thirst. She raised her face to the stars, her eyes hollow, her tears swallowed by the dust. "Let me die here," she begged the night sky. "I am not worthy of life." Her words carried no hope, only the heavy weight of surrender. But the world had other plans. Not far from the pit, a human walked the wasteland. He was tired, his boots worn, his clothes torn by travel. The wind pulled at his cloak as he moved carefully, searching for shelter. Then he heard it, faint, broken, the sound of a voice carried by the wind. He froze, his heart quickening. Was it an echo, or was someone truly crying? He followed the sound step by step until he reached the edge of the shallow pit. And there in the dim moonlight he saw her, an alien woman, weak and trembling, her body half buried in dirt, her eyes staring up at him as if he were a ghost. The human knelt, his hand reaching down. "You are alive," he whispered, almost to himself, but she shook her head, her voice breaking. "No, not alive, just waiting to be covered in soil. Bury me here." Her words stabbed into his chest, sharp and heavy. He had seen despair before, but never this deep, never this final. "I will not bury you," he said softly, but with strength in his voice. He pulled a small flask from his side and lowered it to her lips. "Drink," he told her, his tone firm, but she turned her face away. "Why waste it on me? I am broken, I am nothing." The human did not move his hand. His eyes stayed on hers, steady, refusing to leave. "I will not waste it," he replied, "because you are not nothing." Slowly, with trembling lips, she tasted the water. It burned her cracked throat, but it also brought life back into her chest. Her eyes watered as she looked at him, confusion mixing with pain. Why do you help me?" she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. The human's gaze softened, though his jaw stayed tight. "Because no one deserves to be thrown away," he answered. The night deepened around them, shadows thick and cold. A howl echoed in the distance, low and hungry. The human looked over his shoulder, his body tensing. Predators were near, drawn by weakness and the smell of despair. He reached down again, his hand open, waiting. "Come," he said firmly. "If you stay here, you will die. But if you take my hand, you will live." The alien woman stared at him, torn between fear and exhaustion. Part of her longed to give up, to sink into the dirt and be forgotten. But another part, small and fragile, flickered inside her chest. That part whispered that maybe, just maybe, this human meant his words. With shaking fingers she reached out, her hand brushing against his. The human's grip closed gently but firmly, pulling her up from the pit. Her body was weak, and she stumbled, but he held her steady. For the first time in years, she felt the warmth of someone who would not let her fall. Tears slid down her scarred cheeks as the wind carried the last of her whispered pleas. "I am not breeding material," she said again, but softer now, as if unsure. The human only tightened his hold, his eyes fierce in the moonlight. "You are more than what they called you," he said, his voice steady. And in that moment, under the cold sky, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. She felt seen, she felt human. The wasteland stretched around them, endless and merciless. But inside the shallow pit of despair, something had shifted. A broken woman was no longer alone, and a human had chosen not to walk away, but to stay. Together they faced the night, not as strangers, but as two souls pulled by fate. The wind howled, the predators waited, the stars shone cold above. But for the first time she did not beg for burial. For the first time she wondered if life was still possible. The night stretched on, long and merciless. The human led the alien woman out of the shallow pit, his arms steady around her shoulders. Her steps were weak, her legs trembling as if every movement was a battle. The wasteland wind clawed at them, carrying dust and the faint smell of predators. But the human did not let go, his grip firm, his eyes scanning the horizon. They walked until they reached a cluster of broken stones, jagged and sharp, rising like old bones from the earth. The human guided her there, lowering her carefully against one of the larger rocks. He pulled out his pack, small and worn, filled with little more than scraps. From it he drew another flask and a piece of dried bread. He placed them near her hands, his voice calm. "Eat, drink, you need it." But the alien woman shook her head, her eyes dark with sorrow. Her voice was quiet but heavy. "No, not for me. Do not waste your strength. I am not worth saving." The human crouched beside her, his jaw tight, his voice sharp with frustration. "Do not say that again," he ordered, his tone carrying more steel than she expected. "I have seen the dead. I know what it looks like, and you are alive." She turned away, her gaze fixed on the ground, her body curling tighter against the stone. "I told you," she whispered. "I am broken, useless. My people said so. I am not breeding material. No man, no clan, no tribe wants me, so why do you care?" The words cut like blades in the silence, but the human did not flinch. He leaned closer, his eyes burning into hers. "Because you are not theirs to decide," he said, slow and fierce. "Because your life is your own, and because I will not leave you here to die." Her lips trembled, a tear sliding down her cheek. No one had ever spoken like that to her, not once. Her whole life had been measured by what she could give, what she could produce, and when she failed, she was cast out. Now this stranger, a human, of all things, looked at her as if she mattered beyond all of that. But even so, her heart resisted. The weight of shame was heavy, and the habit of despair was strong. She pushed the food back toward him, her hands trembling. "You need it." "More than me," she said. "You are strong, you can survive. I cannot. Let me go, leave me." Her voice broke at the end as if she wanted him to agree, as if she wanted him to give her the release she could not give herself. The human stared at her, silent for a long moment. Then he took the bread and broke it in half, placing one piece in her hand whether she wanted it or not. He ate the other half slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. "Now you cannot refuse," he said, his tone calm but unyielding. "If I eat, you eat. If I drink, you drink. We survive together." Her chest tightened, her throat ached, and for the first time in years, she felt trapped not by cruelty, but by kindness. The warmth of his stubbornness pressed against the cold walls of her despair. Her body gave in before her heart did, and she lifted the bread with shaking hands, chewing slowly, the taste like dust, but also like hope. Each bite was a reminder that she was still alive, that he had not walked away. The night grew colder, the wind sharper. The human pulled his cloak around her thin frame, wrapping it tightly, ignoring her weak protests. When she said, "I do not deserve this," he answered firmly. "Deserve has nothing to do with it." She lay there, wrapped in warmth that was not her own, her mind restless, her heart confused. Every moment beside him was a war between the part of her that wanted to die and the part of her that dared to believe she could live. In the distance, the predators prowled, their cries echoing across the wasteland. The human's hand never left the knife at his side, his eyes scanning the darkness. But still, he stayed beside her, his body a shield against the night. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the sound of the wind and the faint tremor of her breath. At last, her eyelids grew heavy, and for the first time in years, she fell asleep in safety. The human did not sleep, not fully. He watched her fragile frame, the rise and fall of her chest, the scars that told stories of cruelty. He did not know her name. He did not know her past. But he knew one thing with certainty. She was not worthless. She was not broken. And he would prove it to her, even if it cost him his own strength. When dawn broke, the sun rose pale and weak over the wasteland. The alien woman stirred, her eyes opening slowly, filled with confusion. She looked at the cloak around her shoulders, the food crumbs at her side, the man who had not left. Her lips parted, her voice hoarse. "You should have gone," she said softly. The human turned, his eyes calm, his reply steady. "I told you, I will not leave." And with those words, the second day of her new life began. She did not believe yet, not fully. But somewhere deep inside, a fragile spark flickered. Maybe she was not just something to bury. Maybe she was something to keep alive. The wasteland sun rose higher, burning pale across the sky. Its light was sharp and cruel, throwing long shadows over the rocks where the alien woman and the human had spent the night. The woman stirred, her body stiff, her throat raw. She pulled, the cloak tighter around her, surprised to find warmth still wrapped around her shoulders. The human stood nearby, watching the horizon, his figure steady like a lone guard against the emptiness. She wanted to tell him to go, to leave her, but the words felt weaker now. He had stayed through the night when he could have walked away. He had given food and water he barely had for himself, and deep inside, she felt something she had forgotten long ago, confusion mixed with a tiny spark of safety. The human noticed her wake, his voice calm but firm. "You need to move," he said. "If we stay here, the scavengers will come." She nodded weakly, her body reluctant but her spirit unwilling to argue. Step by step they left the rocks behind, moving toward a dry ridge where broken earth offered little shade. Her legs shook beneath her weight, every scar on her body burning under the sun. Hours passed before she collapsed against a stone. Gasping for air, the human crouched beside her, steady hands on her shoulders. "You are not weak," he told her. "You are wounded." His words carried no pity, only truth. Her lips parted, trembling. "You do not know how wounded," she whispered. She turned her face away, but the human caught the edge of her sleeve. He gently pulled the fabric back, revealing scars that ran deep across her skin. They were not only marks of survival, they were marks of cruelty, carved by others, who had claimed power over her. The human's eyes hardened, his jaw tightening as he traced the patterns of pain etched into her flesh. "They did this to you," he said, his voice low, not asking but knowing. Her breath caught, tears filling her eyes. She tried to cover herself again, shame burning, hotter than the sun. "Yes," she admitted, her voice breaking. "They did it because I failed. I was not good enough, not fertile, not useful. They said I was only a mouth to feed, so they cut me, scarred me, and threw me away. They said I was not breeding material." The words spilled out like poison she had carried too long. She expected disgust. She expected him to step back, to look at her with the same eyes her people had. But he did not move. He stayed close, his face steady, though his eyes burned with anger. "They were wrong," he said sharply, his voice cutting through her shame. "Your scars do not make you worthless. They make them monsters." Her body shook at his words, her chest rising with ragged breaths. No one had ever spoken like that to her. No one had ever refused the cruel truth she had been told all her life. Her heart raced, a storm inside her chest, torn between disbelief and the dangerous seed of hope. She stared at him, her lips trembling. "Why do you keep saying this? Why do you stay?" The human leaned closer, his voice soft but unyielding. "Because I have seen broken things made whole again. And because you are not broken, not to me." Her tears fell freely now, her hands covering her face. The silence between them was heavy, filled with the weight of years of suffering and the fragile light of something new. The human did not press her. He only stayed near, his presence solid like stone, and for the first time, She let herself cry in front of another, her sobs spilling into the hot air of the wasteland. When her tears slowed, she looked at him through swollen eyes. "You cannot carry me forever," she whispered. "I will only slow you down." The human shook his head, his tone steady. "I do not carry you because you are a burden. I carry you because you deserve to stand again one day on your own." The sun began to sink, painting the horizon in red and gold. They found shelter in the ruins of an old wall, crumbled but still standing strong enough to block the wind. The human gathered sticks and lit a small fire, its glow pushing back the darkness. The woman sat across from him, the flames dancing on her scarred skin. She watched as he prepared food again, dividing it carefully, giving her the larger share without hesitation. She took the food this time without protest. Her hands shook, but she ate slowly, each bite easing the gnawing emptiness inside. When the silence grew too heavy, she whispered, "I used to dream. Before the scars, before they cast me out, I dreamed of being a mother. But they told me I was cursed, that no child could ever grow inside me, that I was not made for family, only for dirt." Her words were bitter, heavy, sharp as broken glass. The human's eyes met hers across the fire, steady and unshaken. "They lied," he said simply. She stared at him, stunned by the certainty in his voice. "You cannot know that," she whispered, almost pleading, as if she wanted him to agree with her despair. But he leaned forward, his voice low, steady, carrying weight. "I know this. Life does not listen to those who judge it. Life finds its own way, and so will you." Her lips parted, but no words came. The firelight warmed her face, chasing the shadows that had lived there too long. For the first time in years, she felt something stir inside her. Not a child, not yet, but something just as rare. She felt the first fragile thread of belief. The night grew dark. The stars spread across the sky like silver dust. The human leaned back against the wall, keeping his knife close, his eyes watching the horizon. The alien woman curled under his cloak, her scars hidden now, her body trembling less than before. Her mind whispered the words she had lived by for so long. "Bury me here, I am not breeding material." But her heart, fragile and uncertain, whispered something different, something dangerous. What if he was right? The fire from the ruined wall burned low as the night slipped into dawn. The human rose first, his movements quiet but firm, packing what little he carried. The alien woman stirred slowly, her body still heavy with exhaustion, her scars aching. Under the morning chill, she blinked at him through tired eyes, her voice low. "You could leave me now, no one would blame you." The human glanced back, his jaw set. "I already told you I will not leave." She tried to rise, her knees buckling, but his hand was there again, steady, lifting her gently. They walked together into the wasteland, the sun rising harsh and merciless. The ground cracked beneath their feet, dust swirling like smoke in the air. Every step was a battle, her breath shallow. But the human stayed close, guiding her pace. The silence stretched long, broken only by the sound of the wind and her soft gasps. By midday the sky turned dark, storm clouds rolling in like a tide. The wind screamed across the land, carrying sand and fire-smelling air. The human pulled his cloak tighter around both of them, shielding her with his body. The storm came fast, a wall of red dust and lightning striking the earth with violent force. The woman stumbled, her arms shielding her face, but he grabbed her hand, pulling her forward. "Do not stop," he shouted above the roar, his voice fierce. Her legs trembled, her lungs burned, the storm battering her body like 1,000 knives. Every step she whispered, I cannot. Let me go." But the human refused, his grip unbreakable, dragging her through the fire-colored storm. The world around them disappeared into chaos, sand and sparks tearing the sky apart. At one point, her strength gave out completely. Her knees hitting the ground, she coughed and sobbed, curling into herself, her voice breaking. "Please, I am nothing. I am not worth saving." The human knelt in front of her, his face fierce, with defiance. "You are not nothing," he growled, pulling her up into his arms. He carried her across the burning ground, the storm raging around them, his body taking every blow. His steps were heavy, his chest rising with deep effort, but he did not falter. The woman clung to him, her face pressed against his shoulder, her tears mixing with dust and blood. For the first time she felt warmth not from fire but from the steady beat of his heart. It was louder than the storm, stronger than the chaos. And in that sound she felt the faint spark of life pushing against despair. Hours seemed like days until they reached the edge of a rocky ridge. The human found shelter beneath a hollowed stone, pulling her inside just as the storm thundered past. His chest heaved with exhaustion, his body bruised and raw, but his eyes never wavered. He set her down gently, brushing dust from her face, his voice rough but steady. "You are alive. We made it." She looked at him through blurred vision, her lips trembling. "Why? Why fight so hard for me?" His answer came without hesitation, his gaze firm and unshaken. "Because you matter," he said simply. "Because someone told you that you don't, and I refuse to let them be right." Her tears spilled again, but this time they were not only from pain, they were from something strange, something she barely remembered. Hope. Her body curled against the wall, her chest rising with sobs, but her hands clutched his cloak, refusing to let go. The storm raged outside, lightning painting the sky. Inside the hollow, their small fire flickered weak but steady. The human worked silently, cleaning the cuts on her skin, wrapping what wounds he could. His hands were careful, his touch never cruel, and each gesture broke another stone in the walls she had built around her heart. She whispered through trembling lips, "I do not understand you." "You do not need to," he said, his tone soft but unyielding. "Just live. That is enough." Her eyes closed, her body weak but her heart restless. In the darkness of the storm she dreamed of her past, the rejection, the cruel voices, the pit of despair. But through the shadows she now also dreamed of him, his arms carrying her, his voice telling her she mattered. And for the first time, the dream did not end with her begging for death. When dawn returned, the storm was gone, leaving the land, scorched and silent. The human stepped outside first, scanning the horizon, his knife still in hand. The alien woman followed slowly, leaning against the stone, her body fragile, but her eyes sharper than before. She watched him standing tall, against the wasteland. The sun behind him, his presence like a wall against the endless void. Her heart ached, heavy with fear, but also with something she had not dared to feel in years. Trust. That day they walked together again side by side. The road ahead was still endless, filled with dangers, but something had changed. Every step was still hard, every breath still painful, but now she did not whisper for death. Instead, she whispered to herself, quiet but clear, "I am alive." The human glanced at her, hearing the words, and gave a small nod. No smile, just steady strength. And in that moment, the road through. Fire became the road to something greater. The wasteland stretched on for days. The endless ground cracked and dry beneath their feet. The alien woman grew stronger with each step, though her body still trembled at times. Her scars ached, her breath faltered, but the human never let her fall. He walked beside her in silence, steady and patient as if his strength could carry them both. And slowly, she began to believe he truly would never leave. One evening they found a cave in the side of a mountain. The air inside was cool, the shadows deep, the sound of dripping water echoing like a heartbeat. The human built a fire from scraps of wood, its light flickering against stone walls. The woman sat close, her arms wrapped around her knees, watching him work. She did not speak, but her eyes never left him, as if she was trying to understand why he stayed. He handed her a bowl of water, warm from the fire. She held it in her hands, staring at the ripples before whispering, "You should not waste this on me." The human's voice was calm but firm. "I already told you I waste nothing." She drank slowly, her lips trembling, every swallow reminding her that she was alive. When she finished, her eyes met his, and for the first time she did not look away. That night, the storm outside howled, wind slamming against the cave walls. The human sat by the fire, sharpening his blade, his face calm. The woman leaned against the stone, the warmth of the fire wrapping around her. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not empty. It was the kind of silence that grew when two souls slowly began to trust. She broke it with a whisper, soft as dust. "Do you not fear me? My people cast me out for a reason. They said I was cursed." The human looked up, his eyes steady, his voice carrying no doubt. "I fear cruelty, not scars, and I see no curse in you." Her throat tightened, tears welling again. But this time she did not hide them. He reached across the fire, his hand steady, open. She hesitated before placing her hand in his, her skin trembling against his rough palm. His grip was warm, not crushing, not demanding, only steady. It was the first time she had touched another without fear. Her tears slid silently, falling into the fire's light. The days passed and life inside the cave became a fragile routine. The human hunted small animals, cooked meals, and guarded the entrance each night. The woman gathered her strength, cleaning the wounds that had never been tended. Her hands shook, her body weak, but each day she grew less like the broken shell she had been. She even laughed once, a soft sound she quickly covered with her hand. But the human noticed. "Do not hide it," he told her, his eyes soft. "Your laugh is proof you are still here." She stared at him, her lips trembling, before whispering, "It feels strange to laugh." "Then laugh until it feels normal, again," he said simply, and went back to building the fire. She turned her face away, but her heart carried his words like warmth against the cold walls inside her. One night, as the fire burned low, she confessed the truth she had buried for years. Her voice was raw, filled with fear and shame. "I wanted a child," she whispered. "Before they cast me out, I dreamed of holding life in my arms, of proving I was not empty. But they said I was cursed, that I could never carry life. So they scarred me, left me to die, and I believed them." Her hands shook as she covered, her face, her tears falling fast. "I begged for death because I could not face the truth of being useless." The human listened, his eyes burning with anger, but his voice steady. "They lied to you," he said, his tone sharp as steel. "They wanted to break you, so they made you believe their cruelty." She looked at him through her tears, her voice breaking. "But what if they were right? What if I am cursed?" The human leaned closer, his eyes locked on hers. "Then let life itself decide, not them," he said firmly. "You are not cursed, you are alive. And that is enough." Her breath hitched, her tears slowing as his words sank into her chest. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever challenged the cruel truth she had carried. She felt her heart stir with something she had not dared to name, hope mixed with longing. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Why do you believe in me?" He answered without hesitation, his voice calm, "Because you deserve someone who does." She curled under his cloak that night, her head resting near his shoulder. For the first time, she did not tremble with fear of being unwanted. Instead, she trembled with the fragile bond forming between them, a bond not built on use, not built on breeding or worth, but on trust. And that trust felt stronger than the walls of the cave around them. The fire burned low, the night grew deep. Outside, the wasteland still howled, full of danger and despair. But inside the cave, something new took root. Fragile but real. The alien woman no longer begged for burial, no longer whispered that she was not breeding material. Instead, she closed her eyes and held on to one thought, one fragile truth. For the first time, she was not alone. The cave had become their shelter, a small world of firelight and shadows where despair slowly lost its grip, the alien woman's. Body grew stronger day by day, her steps steadier, her eyes brighter. She no longer begged to be left behind, though doubt still whispered in the corners of her mind. The human stayed always near, hunting, gathering, guarding, his presence steady. As the stone walls, and in that quiet safety, something inside her began to shift. At first it was only a faint unease, a strange stirring in her body. She thought it was sickness, perhaps a wound left unseen. Her hands pressed against her stomach as she crouched. By the fire, her brow furrowed in worry. The human noticed her silence, his eyes sharp. "What is wrong?" he asked. She shook her head quickly, whispering, "Nothing, just tired." But as days passed, the feeling grew stronger. Her body, once frail, carried a strange warmth deep within. Sometimes she felt dizzy. Sometimes she woke with a racing heart. The memories of her people's cruel words returned. "You are cursed, you are empty, no life will ever grow in you." The echo of those words made her hands tremble each time the stirring grew. One evening, as the fire crackled low, she confessed in a trembling voice, "There is something inside me," she whispered, her arms wrapped around herself. The human froze, his eyes steady, waiting for her to continue. "I thought it was sickness, but it feels different, alive somehow, yet I cannot believe it. I was told I could never—" Her words broke, her tears spilling down her cheeks. The human leaned closer, his voice gentle but firm. "Do not fear it," he said. "Life grows where it chooses, not where others decide." Her breath caught, her heart racing at the certainty in his tone. "But what if I am wrong? What if it is only pain, only false hope?" she asked, her voice trembling. The human reached out, placing his rough hand over hers where it pressed against her stomach. "Then we face it together," he said, steady and unyielding. "But if it is life, then it is proof they lied to you." Her tears fell faster, her body shaking as she held his hand against her. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine it, to imagine that life might truly be inside her. The thought was terrifying, fragile, almost too bright to believe. But the warmth inside her did not fade, and with every passing day, it grew stronger. She no longer whispered for death. She whispered instead to the small spark inside, though her voice shook with fear. Nights in the cave became different. She sat closer to the fire, her hands resting on her stomach, her eyes lost in thought. The human watched quietly, guarding the entrance, his knife ready, his eyes scanning the wasteland. But when he looked at her, his gaze softened, as if he too felt the fragile hope taking root. The bond between them grew, no longer only survival, but something deeper, something unspoken. One morning, as dawn spilled gold across the mountains, she touched the human's arm. Her voice was soft, almost shy. "I feel it now, more clearly. It is not sickness, it is life." The human turned, his face calm but his eyes bright. "Then you carry more strength than you ever believed," he said. Her throat tightened, her eyes filling. "I do not know how to be a mother," she admitted. "I was never meant for this. You will learn," he answered, his tone firm. "Because you have already survived everything they tried to break you with, and now you have more reason to fight." Her lips trembled, her heart heavy with fear and wonder. She lowered her head, whispering through tears, "They told me I was nothing." The human lifted her chin gently, his eyes fierce. "And I tell you, you are everything." The words sank deep, burning through the chains of shame that had bound her. For so long she wept, not from despair, but from the weight of being seen, truly seen. Her hands clutched his, pressing them against her stomach, where the faint stirring grew each day. And in that moment, she no longer believed her people's lies completely. For the first time, she believed in the possibility of life, of family, of something beyond pain. As the days turned into weeks, her body changed slowly. Her strength grew not only from food and rest, but from the knowledge that she was carrying more than herself. The human stayed by her side, gathering more food, building stronger fires, keeping watch every night. When she stumbled, he lifted her. When she doubted, he reminded her of her strength. And though she still trembled, the despair that once filled her voice was fading, replaced by fragile hope. One night, as they sat by the fire, she whispered the words that once had only brought pain. "I wanted this," she admitted softly. "I wanted a child, but I thought it was only a dream. Now it feels real, and I am afraid." The human's hand found hers, his voice steady. All life begins in fear, but what grows from it can be stronger than anything. She leaned into him then, her tears falling silently, her body trembling not from despair but from the overwhelming weight of new hope. The firelight flickered across their faces. Outside, the wasteland was still cruel, the world still dangerous, but inside the cave a miracle had begun, hidden in the fragile body of a woman who had once begged to be buried. Her people had cast her away as worthless, cursed, broken. But now, within her, new life stirred, proof that they had been wrong all along, and as she lay that night beneath the cloak, her hands resting on her stomach, she whispered not to the dirt, not to the darkness, but to the small spark inside her, "I will not leave you. I will not give up." For the first time, she did not whisper for death. For the first time, she whispered a promise for the future. The days in the cave turned to weeks, and the weeks to months. The alien woman's body changed slowly. Carrying the proof of life within her, her steps were steadier now, her voice no longer begging for burial but whispering promises to the child growing inside. The human stayed by her side, his strength unbroken, his presence like a shield against the cruel world beyond. Together they had become more than survivors. They had become something like family, yet danger was never far. One morning the sound of voices echoed across the mountains, sharp and cruel. The woman froze, her body trembling as memories of her people returned. She recognized the language, the tone, the coldness of those who had cast her out. "They are searching," she whispered, fear shaking her voice. "They come for me." The human's hand went to his knife, his eyes scanning the ridge. "Then let them come," he said, calm but fierce. She shook her head, her tears spilling. "You do not understand. They will kill me for defying them. They will kill you for helping me." "But," the human's jaw tightened, his voice steady, "I will not let them touch you, not while I breathe." The voices grew louder, shadows moving across the rocks. The woman clutched her stomach, her body curling protectively around the life inside. She whispered, "I am not strong enough to face them." The human knelt beside her, his eyes locked on hers. "You are stronger than you believe, stronger than all their cruelty. Stand with me, not as their broken outcast, but as who you are now." Her tears fell fast, her body shaking, but she nodded. When her people appeared, their eyes burned with disdain. "There she is," one snarled, pointing at her. "The useless one, the cursed one, throw her back in the dirt where she belongs." The woman flinched, the old shame flooding back. But before she could collapse into it, the human stepped forward, his body a wall between them. "She is not yours to cast aside anymore," he declared, his voice echoing off the stone. "She is not worthless, not cursed. She carries life, she carries hope, and she carries my family." The aliens froze, their eyes narrowing as they looked at her stomach. Whispers spread among them, disbelief mixing with fear. "She cannot," one spat. "She is barren. She is nothing." The woman's chest tightened, her lips trembling. But then she heard his words again in her mind. "You are everything." She stepped forward, her body weak but her voice steady. "You called me broken. You called me cursed, but you were wrong," she cried, her voice shaking with both fear and strength. She placed her hands over her stomach, her tears shining in the firelight of dawn. "I am not breeding material. I am family material, and this life inside me proves it." The words struck the air like lightning, silencing even the cruelest among them. The human stood tall beside her, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder. The aliens glared, their pride wounded, their cruelty exposed, but none of them stepped forward. None dared to face the fire burning in her voice. And slowly, with curses on their lips, they turned away, leaving her standing in the rising sun. Her knees trembled, her body weak, but the human caught her before she fell. She sobbed into his chest, her tears soaking his cloak. "They left me once to die," she whispered. "But this time I did not beg for death. I stood, I spoke, I believed." The human held her close, his voice soft. "Because you are no longer alone. You will never be alone again." Time passed, and the seasons shifted. The cave became not just a shelter but a home, filled with the sound of her laughter, the warmth of shared meals, and the fragile hope of new life. Her body grew heavier, her steps slower, but her heart carried strength she had never known. The human built stronger fires, hunted more food, prepared for the day their child would come, and she, once cast away, now sat at the fire each night, her hands on her stomach, whispering promises of love and safety. When the day came, it was hard, her body trembling with pain, her cries echoing in the cave. Fear gripped her, the old voices whispering she would fail, that she was cursed. But the human stayed at her side, his hand gripping hers, his voice steady. "You are not cursed, you are stronger than all of them, bring life and prove them wrong." Hours passed, her body fighting, her soul pushing through the fire of pain. And then at last, the air filled with the fragile cry of a newborn. Her tears fell freely as she held the small warm bundle in her arms. The child's skin was soft, its cry thin but alive. She looked at the tiny face, disbelief and wonder filling her heart. "I did it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I brought life. I am not empty." The human's eyes shone as he leaned close, his voice steady. "You are full of life, you always were, you only needed to believe." The cave glowed with firelight, the wasteland beyond still cruel and endless. But inside, a family had been made. One human, one alien, and the child of two worlds. Her people had called her broken, cursed, unworthy. But now she held proof in her arms that they had been wrong. She was not breeding material for their cruel judgment. She was a mother, a partner, a family. As the child quieted, she pressed her lips to its forehead, her tears falling softly. Her heart whispered not of despair, not of burial, but of a new dawn. She looked at the human beside her, her voice trembling but strong. "We are not nothing. We are everything." He nodded, his arm around her shoulders, his eyes steady. And together, they faced the wasteland beyond, no longer as broken souls but as a family forged in fire.